Prehistoric witchcraft, or rather shamanism at the time, dates back to the Paleolithic era, around 30,000 years ago. Evidence of early shamanistic practices is found in cave paintings, artifacts, and burial sites across Europe and Asia. But don't think shamans were just old men who danced around the fire with pretty young ladies. Many shamans were in fact women, and the curse or blessing of shamanism was even said to fall on the most beautiful women in the tribe, or the smartest of men. As always, the upcoming hour and a half is packed with mind-blowing, fact-filled information, so try to hang in there, as there's a special cookie waiting for you in the end. And don't forget to grab something to eat right now as well, as nothing beats a good ham sandwich. Your wife would make you one, but considering you clicked on this thumbnail, she's probably asleep already. So without further ado, shamans or witches were seen as intermediaries between the physical and spirit worlds, conducting rituals involving trance states induced by drumming or hallucinogens. Cave paintings, like those in Lascaux, France, depict figures resembling shamans with animalistic features, suggesting their role in hunting magic. These paintings date to around 15,000 BC. The discovery of elaborate burial sites, such as the Sungur site in Russia from 28,000 BC, highlights the significance of shamans in prehistoric societies. Buried with intricate beadwork and ritualistic items, these graves show the reverence for shamans as mediators of the unknown. Artifacts like carved figurines found in Eurasian sites suggest the use of totems and charms in shamanic rituals. These figurines, often depicting hybrid human-animal forms, likely represent spiritual guides or protectors. Shamanistic practices were crucial in prehistoric societies, offering a means to understand and influence their world. But before we start crawling the timeline of witchcraft, let's answer an important question first. Has witchcraft ever been used in warfare? We know Gandalf did it in Lord of the Rings. Rarely, but he did it. But has witchcraft been used in war outside science fiction books and blockbuster movies? Well, witchcraft has long been linked with warfare, serving as a tool of psychological manipulation and strategic advantage. In ancient societies like Egypt and Rome, curses and spells were believed to weaken enemies. Military leaders often consulted oracles and seers to predict battle outcomes. Romans had augurs who interpreted divine will through bird flight patterns. In medieval Europe, wartime saw rampant witchcraft accusations, with leaders and commoners alike believing witches could sway conflicts. A notable instance is the 100 Years' War, where Joan of Arc was accused of witchcraft by the English to discredit her and justify her execution. Fear of witchcraft often led to mass hysteria and witch hunts, destabilizing war-torn regions. In the 16th century, the Scottish government used witch trials to control the population and consolidate power during turbulent times. During World War II, both the Allies and Axis powers reportedly used astrologers and occultists for intelligence and battle forecasts, but more of World War II later. Thus, witchcraft remains a potent tool for psychological manipulation and control in warfare. But which of the witch trials is most well known throughout history? Well, not definitely the most known, but definitely one of the most gruesome was the Pendle witch trials of 1612, held in Pendle Hill, Lancashire. 12 people were accused, 8 women and 2 men from 2 families, charged with using witchcraft to cause harm, including murder. Alison Device allegedly cursed a peddler who then claimed illness, leading to her arrest and that of her family and other locals. The trial at Lancaster Assizes relied on confessions obtained under duress or from children. 10 were found guilty and hanged, 1 was acquitted, and another was tried later and acquitted. Thomas Potts documented the trials in The Wonderful Discovery of Witches in the County of Lancaster, providing a detailed account of the events and insights into the legal processes and societal fears of the time. A pivotal aspect of the Pendle witch trials was the role of 9-year-old Janet Device, whose testimony was crucial in convicting many accused witches. Janet, daughter of accused Elizabeth Device, was notable because child witnesses were typically deemed unreliable. However, her detailed accounts of witch meetings and activities were taken seriously by the court. This reliance on a child's testimony highlights the intense fear and paranoia about witchcraft at the time. Janet's evidence was considered credible due to the specific details that supported convictions. It's important to note that the era's lack of scientific understanding fueled the panic, as people often blamed unexplained illnesses or misfortunes on witchcraft. The region, plagued by poverty, superstition, and religious tension between Catholics and Protestants, saw witchcraft accusations as a way to explain misfortune and blame certain individuals. The accused were mostly poor, marginalized women, making them easy targets. The Pendle witch trials illustrate how fear and superstition could override rational judgment and due process. Over time, the story of the Pendle witches became embedded in local folklore, remaining a significant historical and tourist attraction. Annually, visitors come to Pendle Hill to learn about the trials and reflect on social and judicial changes since then. Up next, Mesopotamian civilization, including Sumer, Akkad, Assyria, and Babylon, which dates back to around 3500 BC, and their belief system was deeply intertwined with witchcraft and demonology, centering on the Anunnaki, gods governing various aspects of the world and underworld. Beneath these deities were numerous lesser spirits, demons, and supernatural beings influencing daily life. Witchcraft in Mesopotamia combined protective and harmful practices. Ashipu practitioners used protective magic, averting harm through rituals and incantations. Conversely, Kaspapu engaged in harmful witchcraft, blamed for causing illness, misfortune, and death. Legal texts like the Code of Hammurabi imposed severe penalties on those accused of evil witchcraft, reflecting societal fear of its malevolent aspects. Mesopotamian demonology was intricate, with specific demons linked to particular afflictions. Pazuzu, for instance, was associated with the southwest wind, bringing famine and locusts. Yet, Pazuzu was also invoked for protection, such as warding off the more dangerous demon Lamashtu, who threatened pregnant women and infants. Divination was a crucial aspect of Mesopotamian magic, used to discern the god's will and predict the future. Common methods included extispacy, examining the entrails of sacrificed animals, and lacanomancy, interpreting oil patterns on water. Temples and ziggurats were centers for these practices, with priest-magicians conducting and interpreting these rituals. Mesopotamians also believed in amulets and charms to protect against evil forces. These objects, inscribed with specific incantations and symbols, were worn or placed in homes. The Maklu series of tablets, a significant collection of anti-witchcraft rituals, combated malevolent magic. These texts detailed ceremonies to purge demonic influence, reflecting the pervasive concern for spiritual security. Mythological texts like the Epic of Gilgamesh showcased encounters with supernatural forces, blending human experience with divine intervention. Ancient Egyptian witchcraft, on the other hand, dating back to around 4500 BC, was deeply intertwined with religious practices. Egyptians believed in a complex pantheon of gods and goddesses controlling various aspects of life and nature, and most importantly, Heka, the divine force of magic. Witchcraft involved invoking these deities for protection, healing, and guidance. The Ebers Papyrus, a medical text from around 1550 BC, contains numerous spells and incantations used by Egyptian healers. And magic was not separate from religion. The same priests who conducted religious rituals also performed magical acts. Amulets were commonly used in both life and death for protection. The Ankh, representing life, and the scarab, symbolizing rebirth, were some of the most popular amulets. Pharaohs often employed magicians thought to possess the ability to interpret dreams and foresee the future. These magicians were always highly respected members of society. Ancient Egyptian witchcraft was also characterized by its use of symbols, rituals, and a strong belief in the afterlife. Many spells were designed to ensure safe passage to the next world, reflecting their deep-seated beliefs. The Book of the Dead, for example, is a famous text providing detailed instructions for navigating the afterlife, with spells and rituals designed to protect the deceased and ensure a safe journey. Overall, witchcraft in ancient Egypt was a multifaceted practice deeply embedded in the fabric of daily life, and its deep legacy can still be observed in modern magical practices across the world. And now, let's take a look at how our friends in Israel have dealt with witchcraft. I'm sure they have a rich history with it, so let's see if I'm right. The Hebrew Scriptures, or Tanakh, consist of 3 sections: the Torah or Law, Nevi'im or Prophets, and Ketuvim or Writings. These texts have significantly shaped Jewish history, culture, and religious practices. A notable topic within these texts is the stance on witchcraft and sorcery. Various passages oppose witchcraft. Exodus 22 verse 18 is often cited. "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live," indicating witchcraft was a capital offense. Leviticus 19:26 and Deuteronomy 18:10-12 also prohibit divination, soothsaying, and sorcery. These prohibitions aim to maintain the religious purity of the Israelite community and focus worship on Yahweh, the God of Israel. The Hebrew Scriptures condemn these practices without detailing what constituted witchcraft, leaving interpretation to religious authorities and scholars. Despite strong prohibitions against witchcraft in Hebrew Scriptures, ancient Israelites were not immune to such practices. One notable story is King Saul and the Witch of Endor in 1 Samuel 28. Facing the Philistine threat and abandoned by God, Saul consults a medium to summon the prophet Samuel's spirit for guidance. This act highlights the tension between prohibitions and the reality of seeking forbidden practices in distress. Hebrew scriptures also mention false prophets and sorcerers, like Pharaoh's magicians in Exodus, portrayed negatively. Their abilities are shown as inferior to Yahweh's divine power. Thus, these stories reinforce the idea that reliance on witchcraft and sorcery is futile and disobedient to God's will. The prohibitions against witchcraft in the Hebrew scriptures significantly influenced Jewish thought and legal tradition. Rabbinic literature, forming the basis of Jewish law or halakha, elaborates on these commands. The Talmud addresses various prohibited magics and their consequences. Medieval scholars like Maimonides reinforced these bans, deeming such practices futile and contrary to faith in God. Despite clear prohibitions, historical and archaeological records show that some forms of folk magic persisted in Jewish communities. Amulets, charms, and artifacts suggest a blurred line between accepted religious practice and condemned witchcraft. Who would have guessed? Their history checks out as relatively witchcraft-free. Time to move on to somewhere where beautiful chicks cast spells. I know, there must be some in ancient Greece or ancient Rome. And yes, there indeed are. Witchcraft in ancient Greece and Rome involved various practices and beliefs. In ancient Rome, erotic magic was prominent, with spells designed to invoke love or sexual desire frequently documented. The poet Ovid wrote extensively on love potions and charms, teaching how to use them and how they've been used in the past. There was also a strong belief in the potency of curses. Lead curse tablets have been discovered across the Roman Empire, inscribed with invocations to deities to bring misfortune upon enemies. In Greece, it intertwined with religion and medicine. Greeks believed in deities controlling nature, and many witches claimed to harness these powers. Figures like Circe and Medea from mythology were renowned for their magic. Greeks used herbs, potions, and spells, believing they could ward off evil, cure diseases, and influence gods. Witchcraft was linked to the underworld, with Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft and ghosts, venerated by practitioners of dark arts. She was often depicted at crossroads, considered hubs of supernatural activity. But Roman society viewed witchcraft with a little suspicion, meanwhile acknowledging its potential power, often associating it with foreign traditions. The 12 Tables, Rome's earliest code of laws, included provisions against spellcasting intended to harm crops or livestock. Indeed, I wouldn't want to lose my livestock over a fight with the neighbor, who happens to be a witch. However, not all witchcraft was seen as malevolent. Some practices were part of daily life. Roman witches, or saga, used enchantments and herbal remedies, serving as healers or midwives. Unlike in Greece, where gods were central to magical practices, Roman witchcraft emphasized rituals and spells independent of divine intervention. During the late Roman Republic and early imperial periods, witchcraft took on sinister connotations. Accusations of witchcraft became tools for political maneuvering and personal vendettas. Historian Tacitus recorded instances where powerful individuals were accused of using magic to eliminate rivals, often leading to trials and executions. Despite fear and legal consequences, magical practices persisted among the general population. Love spells and protective amulets were common, reflecting the people's desire to control their environment and fate. The poet Virgil mentioned magic in his epic, the Aeneid, highlighting its presence in Roman cultural life. Necromancy, invoking the dead to predict the future or influence events, was a significant aspect of Roman witchcraft. This dark form of magic often involved elaborate rituals. The use of wax figures to represent enemies and curses is a noted example, where the figure would be pierced or melted to harm the intended victim. Witchcraft in ancient Greece and Rome was closely tied to divination. Diviners, called mantis in Greece and augur in Rome, interpreted the gods' will through methods like reading animal entrails, observing bird flights, or casting lots. Divination was crucial for decisions in warfare, politics, and daily life. Another key practice was creating magical objects, known as phylacteries in Greece and deficciones in Rome. Phylacteries were amulets with magical texts for protection or good fortune. Deficciones were curse tablets invoking supernatural forces against enemies, typically made of lead and placed in graves or wells to enhance their power. Witchcraft remained a potent and feared element in ancient Greece and Rome until the rise of Christianity. As Christian doctrines spread, they clashed with pagan practices, including witchcraft. Early Christian leaders condemned magic and witchcraft, associating them with diabolic influences. Texts like those of St. Augustine argued against the legitimacy of magical practices. By the late Roman Empire, witchcraft was increasingly criminalized and linked to heresy. Laws against magic expanded and became more severe, culminating in the persecution of supposed witches. The Code of Theodosius, issued in 438 AD, included strict penalties for practicing magic, reflecting the Christianization of the Roman Empire. Despite the crackdown, folk practices and remnants of ancient magic persisted among rural populations. Amulets and charms continued to be used for protection and healing. But now, something I know you'll love and enjoy. Always beautiful, always weird, it's the good old Japan. Witchcraft in ancient Japan dates back to the Jomon period from 14,000 to 300 BC. Yeah, that's some old-ass magic right there. Archaeological finds reveal clay figurines known as dogu used in magical and shamanistic rituals. These figures, often depicting women with exaggerated features, suggest women's significant role in early magical practices. During the Yayoi period from 300 BC to 300 AD, the role of shamans, or miko, became more prominent. Miko, usually women, served as intermediaries between the spiritual and physical realms, performing rituals for bountiful harvests, curing illnesses, and protecting against natural disasters. This period also saw the integration of animistic beliefs, worshipping natural entities like trees, mountains, and rivers as deities. Early Japanese witchcraft was deeply connected to these animistic practices, emphasizing harmony between humans and nature. By the Kofun period, spanning from 250 to 538 AD, Chinese folk religion and Taoism began influencing Japanese spiritual practices, shaping the evolution of witchcraft and shamanistic traditions in Japan. Witchcraft in Japan evolved significantly during the Asuka period, from 538 to 710 AD, with the introduction of Buddhism and Confucianism from China and Korea. These new beliefs blended with indigenous Shinto, creating a unique spiritual landscape that included witchcraft. The role of the miko remained prominent, performing kagura, a ritual dance and music to appease kami or spirits and ancestral ghosts. These rituals maintained societal balance and harmony, highlighting the importance of spiritual practices in daily life. Continental traditions introduced formalized rituals and complex pantheons, enriching Japanese spiritual heritage. By the Nara period, from 710 to 794 AD, the amalgamation of diverse beliefs fostered an environment where witchcraft thrived within the broader religious and spiritual experience. During the Heian period, the years 794 to 1185 AD, witchcraft and shamanistic practices became more structured, intertwined with court ceremonies. The miko, originally shamans, evolved into an organized institution within Shinto shrines, performing rites and divinations for the empire's well-being. Onmyoji, practitioners of Onmyodo, a blend of natural science, occultism, and Taoist principles, used divination, astronomy, and rituals to influence spiritual and physical realms, conducting exorcisms, protection against evil spirits, and ensuring harmony between humans and nature. Famous onmyoji like Abe no Seimei achieved legendary status, impacting various aspects of Japanese culture. This period saw the codification of spiritual practices and the integration of witchcraft within Shinto and Buddhist frameworks. And lastly, during the Kamakura period, spanning from 1185 to 1333 AD, Japan's socio-political landscape transformed with the rise of the samurai class. Witchcraft practices adapted, retaining influence in both rural and urban areas. The miko continued their roles, blending with local folklore and samurai protective practices to ward off evil and ensure favorable battle conditions. Onmyoji served the shogunate and samurai lords, advising on auspicious times for warfare and construction based on astrological and geomantic readings. Witchcraft and magic stories thrived in literature. Incorporating witchcraft into military strategies demonstrated its relevance and adaptability to Japan's evolving culture. And now that most of the Japanese tentacle history is reviewed, let's look at another fun continent instead. African witchcraft has ancient roots, significantly shaping cultural and social dynamics across various communities. One thing's for sure, these bad boys do know how to cast a spell. I can guarantee you that. African societies often attributed misfortune and disease to witchcraft. To address these issues, communities employed diviners and healers. These specialists conducted ceremonies to identify problems and neutralize malevolent forces, using objects like bones and shells for divination and guidance from the spirit world. Witchcraft also helped maintain social order. Accusations of witchcraft reinforced social norms and discouraged antisocial behavior. In many West African communities, being accused of witchcraft was a serious offense, leading to social ostracization or even death. Such accusations often emerged during crises, like famines or epidemics, when communities sought explanations for their suffering. Interestingly, some African societies viewed witchcraft positively. In certain cultures, witches were seen as guardians of communal knowledge and spiritual secrets. Their magical powers were believed to benefit society, ensuring successful harvests and protecting communities from harm. In southern Africa, witchcraft was integral to rites of passage and life events. The Zulu people, for instance, incorporated witchcraft into ceremonies for birth, puberty, marriage, and death. Witch doctors, known as sangomas and inyangas, were key figures in these rituals, performing healing practices, divinations, and protective magic to ensure the health and prosperity of individuals and communities. Southern African witch doctors used herbs and natural remedies to treat illnesses. During the colonial period, the perception and practice of witchcraft transformed significantly. European colonial powers viewed African witchcraft with suspicion and hostility, associating it with paganism and barbarism. Consequently, colonial authorities sought to suppress these practices through legal and religious campaigns. These efforts forced witchcraft underground, where it persisted despite attempts at eradication. Ironically, colonialism also led to a resurgence in witchcraft practices. As traditional social structures were disrupted, many Africans turned to witchcraft to cope with the uncertainties of colonial rule. This period saw the emergence of new forms of witchcraft, blending traditional beliefs with elements introduced by the colonial experience. In East Africa, witch hunts were regular and targeted those accused of harmful witchcraft, resulting in severe punishments like banishment or execution. Conversely, beneficial magic, mundumugo, was respected for protection and healing. The Maasai of East Africa also had rich traditions related to witchcraft. They believed in the spiritual power of Liban. Spiritual leaders and witch doctors who foresaw the future, healed the sick, and offered protection against evil. Maasai witchcraft stories passed down orally were often depicted in folklore and legends. Despite missionaries and colonial administrations' efforts to eradicate these practices, witchcraft and traditional beliefs thrived across Africa. Today, witchcraft remains a significant aspect of African spirituality and culture, coexisting with modern religions and adapting to changing social dynamics. Let's be sure to keep these awesome traditions alive. But enough with Africa. I know they're fun down there, but Jesus Christ, let's give some screen time to someone else as well, right? How about the ancient Chinese? They do make everything that's in your home, so why not give these guys a chance? Let's overlook the camps this time. Chinese witchcraft is deeply rooted in early religious and spiritual beliefs. One of the earliest mentions dates back to the Shang dynasty, which spanned from 1600 to 1046 BC, where oracle bones were used for divination. These bones, from ox scapulae or turtle shells, were inscribed with questions for deities about harvests, warfare, or royal affairs. Diviners, often shamans or witches, interpreted cracks formed by intense heat. This practice, pyro-osteomancy, linked the earthly and spiritual realms. Texts like the Zhou Li, or Rites of Zhou from the Zhou dynasty, years 1046 to 256 BC, document shamanic roles, highlighting their socio-political significance. These ritual specialists could invoke spirits, perform exorcisms, and mediate between humans and gods. This underscores how spiritual and political realms intersected in ancient Chinese witchcraft. The Qin and Han dynasties significantly influenced the development of witchcraft in ancient China. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of Qin, was obsessed with immortality and frequently sought the expertise of magicians, alchemists, and shamans. These masters of esoterica claimed to summon spirits and create elixirs of life, merging witchcraft with early Chinese medicine and Taoist practices. During the Han dynasty, these practices became more structured and were documented in texts like the Book of Han and records of the Grand Historian. Han emperors consulted shamans and diviners for state and personal health guidance. This era established the Wu tradition, a class of shamans specializing in rituals to expel demons, attract good fortune, and heal the sick. State sponsorship of their activities underscored the formal recognition of witchcraft's societal role. Ancient Chinese witchcraft is intertwined with medicine and healing. Texts like the Huangdi Neijing blend medical knowledge with shamanistic practices, underscoring witchcraft's role in early Chinese healthcare. Shamans and witches diagnosed and treated illnesses by invoking spirits, conducting rituals, and preparing herbal remedies. Talismanic scripts inscribed on paper, wood, or metal were thought to harness supernatural powers for protection and healing. Witches and shamans also performed rituals for good harvests, favorable weather. While some practices were viewed with suspicion, witchcraft was generally respected for its perceived benefits. The Tang dynasty, from 608 to 907 AD, saw a flourishing of esoteric practices, including witchcraft. During this period, the state heavily patronized witchcraft, integrating it into religious and state functions. Examples include using talismans and incantations to protect the state or individuals against maleficent forces. In the Song dynasty, from 960 to 1279 AD, the institutionalization of witchcraft continued, blending Confucian, Taoist, and Buddhist elements. Song scholars documented various magical practices in encyclopedic works like the Taiping Guangji. This era also saw the emergence of female shamans, or wu, who played crucial roles in local religious activities and community health. These women were believed to have special connections with spirits, providing services ranging from spiritual guidance to medical treatments. The portrayal of witchcraft evolved over centuries, reflecting broader cultural, religious, and political changes. Its integration into daily life underscores its enduring influence on Chinese culture, signifying a multifaceted tradition woven into the fabric of ancient Chinese society. Next up, India. The concept of witches in India is deeply rooted in historical and cultural traditions. Known locally as Dayans, their origins trace back to ancient Indian folklore and mythology. Historically, Dayans were believed to possess supernatural powers granted by malevolent spirits or deities. They were often depicted as women who mastered magical practices and could cause harm through their mystical abilities. Ancient texts like the Atharva Veda, one of the four Vedas written between 1200 and 1000 BC, reference witchcraft and rituals to ward off evil spirits. In rural India, belief in witches persists among certain communities. Women seen as deviating from societal norms or possessing certain knowledge were often labeled as witches, facing social ostracism and severe punishments, including violent exorcisms. During the medieval period, witch hunts became common, with those accused of witchcraft subjected to trials often ending in death. Branding women as witches in India was not merely superstition, but also a tool for social control, particularly over women's behavior and independence. In various regions of India, the portrayal of witches varies based on local customs and beliefs. In Assam, witches, known as daini, are believed to cause diseases and calamities through their malevolent powers. In Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, witch hunting has historical roots, with tribal communities targeting individuals presumed to be witches. In Rajasthan and West Bengal, tales of chudales, or female ghosts who died during childbirth, are prevalent, often serving as cautionary stories to ensure women adhere to societal expectations. Historical records indicate that accusations of witchcraft were frequently used to settle personal vendettas and disputes, generally targeting widows, elderly women, or those without powerful family backing. This strategic targeting highlights a gendered aspect, as the majority of accused witches were women, reflecting patriarchal structures within Indian society. The British colonial period further complicated the witchcraft narrative. British authorities initially dismissed witchcraft as irrational superstition, yet colonial policies inadvertently reinforced local power dynamics, allowing witch hunting practices to persist in rural areas. Reports from the 19th and early 20th centuries document cases of witch hunts and the brutal treatment faced by accused women. Witchcraft beliefs and witch hunts in India persist due to socioeconomic, cultural, and psychological factors. Economic distress, lack of education, and social tensions underpin witchcraft accusations, typically targeting vulnerable individuals. Local healers or shamans perpetuate these beliefs, acting as both protectors and accusers. Psychological phenomena like hysteria and mass panic also fuel accusations. Remote communities with limited access to modern medicine and education are particularly susceptible. The Indian government has enacted laws like the Prevention of Witch Hunting Act in several states, but enforcement is challenging due to ingrained beliefs and local resistance. Activists educate communities, support victims, and advocate for stronger legal protections. Fear of witchcraft influences social dynamics in rural India, highlighting the need for a multifaceted approach involving economic development, education, and community sensitization to combat this practice. Despite modern advancements, witchcraft accusations still significantly impact Indian society. Educational programs aim to dismantle the superstitions fueling witchcraft accusations. Legal aid and counseling services support victims and their families, aiding their reintegration into society. But now, the infamous medieval Europe. The origins of witchcraft and the burning of witches in medieval Europe have deep historical roots. The term witch comes from the Old English Wicca, meaning craft of the wise. Initially, witchcraft was linked to folk healing and pagan practices. Early medieval healers and wise individuals were respected community members. However, this changed around the 11th century when the Christian Church sought to consolidate power and eliminate competing beliefs. The Church began viewing these practices as heretical and dangerous, marking a turbulent era for those accused of witchcraft. The fear of witchcraft surged with the spread of the Black Death in the 14th century, which decimated a third of Europe's population. Seeking scapegoats, people turned to accusations of witchcraft as an outlet for their fear and paranoia. In 1487, Malleus Maleficarum, written by Heinrich Kramer and Jacob Sprenger, intensified the witch hunt frenzy. This book, endorsed by the Pope, served as a manual for identifying, interrogating, and executing witches and became a key text in their persecution. The witch hunts peaked between the 15th and 17th centuries, resulting in thousands of executions, mainly of women. Methods of identifying and persecuting witches were brutal and often lacked due process. Accused individuals faced trials involving torture to extract confessions, using devices like the rack, thumbscrews, and sleep deprivation. Confessions often led to execution by hanging or burning at the stake. The trials lacked transparency, with accusations frequently based on personal vendettas or unfounded rumors. Communities were gripped by fear, neighbors turning against each other. Witch trials occurred across Europe, notably in Germany, France, and England. The witch trials in Würzburg and Bamberg, Germany, during the 1620s were among Europe's largest and deadliest. Over 1,000 people were executed. In Würzburg, entire families, including children as young as 7, were accused. The trials were marked by extreme violence and hysteria, driven by religious and political turmoil. Bamberg faced similar chaos, with Prince Bishop Heinrich Forner fervently pushing the persecution. Both cities extensively used torture, destabilizing the regions. The Salem witch trials of 1692 in Massachusetts were influenced by European practices and fears, but we'll get to Salem later in the documentary, as it's so important of a trial. By the late 17th and early 18th centuries, the fervor surrounding witch trials began to wane. The Enlightenment era brought a shift towards rational thought and skepticism of superstitions. Intellectuals like Voltaire and John Locke advocated for reason, individual rights, and scientific inquiry, challenging the belief in witchcraft. Legal reforms also played a crucial role as more structured judicial systems emerged, emphasizing evidence-based trials and due process. Additionally, the horrific outcomes of past witch hunts served as cautionary tales, prompting societies to reconsider their stance on witchcraft accusations. Although witch trials declined, their historical impact profoundly marked European society. Literature and folklore continued portraying witches, often as malevolent figures linked to dark magic. The legacy of witch hunts also spurred legal and social reforms to prevent future injustices. Examining the origins of witchcraft and witch burnings requires considering the broader socio-political context of medieval Europe. The Church's role, shifting power dynamics, and pervasive fear of the unknown contributed to witch hunts. Economic hardships like famines and wars exacerbated social tensions, making scapegoating vulnerable individuals more likely. The intersection of religious, social, and political factors created an environment ripe for witch hunts. Understanding these complexities elucidates how fear, ignorance, and authority can combine to produce widespread persecution. Recognizing the mechanisms that fueled the witch hunts, religious zealotry, economic strain, and social tensions, provides insight into how similar patterns might manifest today. By remembering these dark chapters of history, we can advocate more effectively for reason, justice, and the protection of vulnerable communities. But now that we've discussed Europe for a while, let's look at Americas, specifically pre-colonial Americas. In pre-colonial Americas, witchcraft and shamanism were integral to many indigenous cultures, each with unique beliefs and practices. The Aztecs viewed witchcraft through spiritual and medical lenses. Aztec women, Tisitl, were essential healers using herbs and rituals. The Inca civilization had sorcistas, who consulted spirits and performed healing ceremonies. Inca shamans believed they could communicate with gods, predict the future, and influence natural events, blending religious and everyday life. Similarly, the Mapuche of Chile had machi, mainly women, who served as healers and spiritual guides, performing intricate ceremonies to cure ailments and protect communities from evil spirits. The Huron-Wendat nation recognized Arendio Wania, shamans who mediated between the physical and spiritual worlds, using dreams and visions to guide their people. Witchcraft among North American tribes, such as the Navajo, Hopi, and Apache, included various rituals, protective charms, and healing practices. Navajo witches, Aunt Ihni, were thought to use witchcraft for both helpful and harmful purposes. The Maya civilization featured shamans called Amen, who practiced divination, performed ritual sacrifices, and acted as intermediaries between gods and humans. They used objects like crystals and mirrors for their rituals. The Olmecs believed in naguals, humans who could shapeshift into animals for spiritual purposes. The Australian Aboriginal concept of dream time involved a state beyond the physical realm where spiritual beings could be encountered for guidance and knowledge. Among the Cherokee, Ottawahai witches served as healers and protectors, performing ceremonies and crafting talismans for healing and protection. The Zuni people believed in Uwanami, beings who could control the weather and influence events, using rituals and prayers to maintain community harmony. The Sioux had Wikasa Wakan, spiritual practitioners who sought visions to guide their tribes, cure diseases, and secure favorable conditions through spiritual communication. The Abenaki, a Native American tribe from the northeastern United States, believed in powerful witches known as Midewiwin, who could heal, protect, and control elements using herbs, chants, and rituals. The Haida people of the Pacific Northwest believed in Skana, spirits that could possess people and animals, invoked during ceremonies for hunting success and community well-being. The Kwakwaka'wakw had Hamatsa rituals, with secret societies performing exorcisms and spiritual healings. The Yucatec Maya had an elaborate pantheon of deities, and their shamans, Chilam, used bloodletting and hallucinogens to communicate with the gods. The Iroquois Confederacy had false faces, a society of medicine men and women wearing carved wooden masks to ward off evil spirits and cure diseases through dances and rituals. Among the Inuit, shamans called Angakuk traveled to the spirit world for guidance and healing, using drumming and chanting. In pre-colonial Mesoamerica, the Tepehuan believed in shamans called Hecha, who could both heal and curse. The Tarahumara had Owiruame, who communicated with spirits and performed protective and prophetic rituals. The Huichol practiced shamanism through Mara Akate, who undertook pilgrimages and used peyote in ceremonies to connect with the spiritual realm. In South America, the Tucano of the Amazon had Yai Masa, shamans who performed intricate rituals with chanting and hallucinogenic plants to mediate between humans and spirits. The Carib tribes of the Caribbean believed in Boye, shamans who conducted healing rituals and linked the physical and spiritual worlds. The Yanomami of the Amazon had Reahu, shamans who used tobacco and other plants to enter trances and communicate with spirits for guidance and healing. These practices highlight the extraordinary range and importance of witchcraft and shamanism across pre-colonial Americas. During the 16th and 17th centuries, European colonists brought their beliefs and fears about witchcraft to the Americas. These superstitions merged with indigenous folklore and the unique challenges of the New World. Colonists feared witchcraft, believing it manifested through malevolent magic or pacts with the devil. Laws against witchcraft were stringent. Accusations often led to trials and severe penalties. The infamous Salem witch trials of 1692 epitomized these fears. Witchcraft beliefs among colonists stemmed from European traditions dating back to the late medieval period. The case of Grace Sherwood, the Witch of Pungo, in Virginia, highlighted these attitudes when she was accused in 1698 and subjected to a trial by water. Clergy often reinforced these fears, interpreting natural disasters as divine punishment for the community's sins and linking them to witchcraft. Religious leaders like Increase Mather emphasized purging the community of perceived devilish influences. Supernatural explanations were used for unexplained events, and accusations could stem from personal vendettas or financial disputes. The link between witchcraft and medical practices complicates the historical narrative. Many accused witches were folk healers or midwives whose knowledge of herbs and natural remedies was misunderstood and feared. With limited formal medical knowledge, these women provided essential services but also aroused suspicion. In 1640, Margaret Jones of Charlestown, Massachusetts, was executed for witchcraft, largely due to her role as a healer. Colonial records indicate she was accused of using her remedies to cause harm rather than heal. Jealousy and distrust likely played roles in her conviction. The blending of indigenous healing practices with European methods often led to greater mistrust. Colonists were wary of anything unfamiliar or inexplicable. Religious leaders warned that these healers could be conduits for the devil's work, furthering the fear surrounding their activities. Community dynamics significantly influenced witchcraft accusations. Close-knit colonial settlements allowed personal disputes and neighborhood tensions to escalate into allegations. Land ownership and inheritance disputes were common sources of conflict. Children sometimes initiated witch hunts, and once accused, proving innocence was nearly impossible due to the belief in spectral evidence and the community's fervent desire to punish witches. Colonies like Massachusetts and Connecticut faced frequent threats from their environment, amplifying fears of witchcraft. The new and unpredictable New World environment made many natural occurrences frightening and inexplicable to colonists, feeding into supernatural fears. Puritans, Quakers, and other sects often viewed each other with suspicion, and these differences could morph into witchcraft accusations. For instance, Quakers in New England were sometimes accused by Puritans who saw their beliefs and practices as heretical. The legal framework at the time facilitated these trials. Colonies adopted English legal practices, including severe penalties for witchcraft. The use of spectral evidence, testimony that the spirit or specter of the accused was seen committing witchcraft, was a particularly controversial aspect, often leading to convictions based on unprovable evidence. Colonial courts, influenced by English common law, followed strict procedures. Witch hunts often relied on confessions obtained through duress or torture. Giles Corey's case, where he was pressed to death during the Salem witch trials for refusing to plead, exemplifies the brutal methods used. Legal records show that even spectral evidence, a highly disputed form of testimony, was allowed in court. Clergy actively participated, serving as judges, witnesses, and advocates, often interpreting unexplained phenomena as diabolic evidence. This overlap of religious and legal spheres further complicated the judicial process. The Massachusetts Body of Liberties, enacted in 1641, included death penalties for witchcraft, setting a precedent for harsh punishments. Pamphlets and sermons circulated widely, inciting fear and providing theological justification for witch hunts. These publications reinforced a cultural narrative viewing witchcraft as a dire threat to the community's moral and spiritual well-being. Under such conditions, rational discourse was overshadowed by fear and superstition, perpetuating a cycle of paranoia and execution. Over time, hysteria surrounding witchcraft in colonial America waned. By the early 18th century, skepticism about witch trials grew. The Enlightenment encouraged rational perspectives and questioned superstitions fueling witch hunts. Legal reforms reduced witchcraft prosecutions. In 1702, the Massachusetts General Court declared the Salem witch trials a tragic mistake and annulled many convictions. Public apologies were issued and reparations made to the families of the accused. Prominent figures like Increase Mather, who had supported the trials, began to oppose spectral evidence. This shift marked the start of a more secular, evidence-based justice system. Next up, a Baltic country with the most amazing forests, Estonia. Witchcraft in Estonia holds a deep, mysterious history, blending ancient pagan traditions with later Christian influences. Tracing back several centuries, Estonian witchcraft initially aligned with pagan rituals. Estonian pagans believed in various nature spirits and conducted rituals to honor them. Folk legends often portrayed witches as cunning women living on village outskirts, believed to control natural forces, and feared for their curses and misfortune-bringing abilities. One notable type of Estonian witch is the krat, a magical creature made from household items and brought to life by a witch or sorcerer through a pact with the devil. Krats performed tasks for their master, but could become dangerous if not properly managed. Additionally, tales of werewolves or libba hunt were prominent in Estonian lore. These werewolves were thought to be humans who could transform into wolves, often with a witch's aid. With Christianity's spread in the 13th century, many pagan practices were suppressed but persisted in rural areas. During the Middle Ages, Estonian witchcraft became associated with the devil, influenced by broader European beliefs. Folk practices, often involving local healers using herbs and spells, still dominated. By the 16th and 17th centuries, witch hunts emerged, echoing European hysteria. A notable case in 1615 involved Mattis Mats, an Estonian witch accused and executed for her alleged practices. Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, Estonian witchcraft evolved amidst Enlightenment ideals and peasant uprisings. During this period, Estonia experienced a resurgence of national consciousness, with folklore, including tales of witches, shaping national identity. By the 20th century, witchcraft practices receded, overshadowed by modern medicine and science. Today, Estonian museums and cultural festivals highlight these mystical aspects, ensuring the intriguing history of witchcraft remains in public consciousness. Witchcraft practices have been integral to Southeast Asian cultures for centuries. In Indonesia, dukun shamanic healers use traditional spells and herbs to cure illness and ward off evil spirits. Their role extends to blessings and protection in agriculture and familial harmony. In the Philippines, pre-colonial Babaylan were female spiritual leaders and healers, revered for communicating with the spirit world. They held social and political influence, participating in decision-making and leading community rituals. In Thailand, morphi, or spirit mediums, act as intermediaries between humans and the spiritual realm, offering guidance, protection, and healing. These practitioners undergo rigorous training and initiation rites. Cambodian witchcraft, rooted in ancient Khmer traditions, involves kru, or traditional healers, who use charms, amulets, and rituals to address physical and spiritual ailments. In the Tibetan region, witchcraft and shamanistic traditions are deeply interwoven with Tibetan Buddhism. Bon, an ancient pre-Buddhist religion, incorporates magical practices to influence natural and spiritual forces. Bon rituals involve complex ceremonies, including protective amulets and elaborate offerings to appease deities and spirits. Tibetan lamas engage in esoteric practices to maintain harmony between the physical and spiritual realms. In Mongolia, the role of bo, or shamans, is central to spiritual life. Mongolian shamans conduct rituals to summon spirits, protect against misfortune, and ensure communal well-being. These practices date back to the nomadic tribes, reflecting a strong connection to nature and the ancestral world. In Bhutan, witchcraft and magic are part of the spiritual tapestry. Pawo and Pamo are male and female shamans responsible for healing illnesses, exorcising spirits, and providing divinations. Their rituals often involve trance states and invocations of protective deities. In Vietnam, witchcraft, known as Thut Phu Thuy, invokes spirits and ancestors for guidance and protection. Vietnamese shamans, or Thay Phap, are pivotal in community rituals, especially for healing and safeguarding against supernatural forces. They perform intricate ceremonies with incantations, offerings, and talismans. In Malaysia, traditional witchcraft, referred to as bomoh or pawang, involves mystical chants, plants, and spiritual guidance to heal and protect the community. Bomoh serve as both healers and spiritual advisors. In Myanmar, witchcraft intertwines with local animist traditions, where Weza, semi-immortal beings with mystical powers, guide and protect humans. Practices often include creating yadaya, or protective charms, to avert misfortune. In Sri Lanka, witchcraft has a long-standing history, with rituals invoking benevolent deities for blessings and healing. Kadadiya, or traditional exorcists, conduct ceremonies to expel evil spirits and cure illnesses using sacred chants and elaborate rituals rooted in local belief systems. In ancient witchcraft practices in Pakistan, the pir, or revered saint, is believed to possess supernatural abilities through spiritual connections. Rooted in Sufi traditions, these rituals involve healing, protection, and guidance. In Bangladesh, witchcraft, or jadoo tona, intersects with local folklore and religious practices. Shamans and traditional healers use spells, amulets, and herbal remedies to address physical and spiritual issues. In Bhutan, witchcraft and magic are deeply integrated into its spiritual culture, with Pawo and Pamo exorcising spirits and healing through trance rituals and invocations. But now, the European country that maybe burned the most witches of all, good old Portugal. Witchcraft in Portugal has ancient roots, blending indigenous beliefs with Roman pagan rituals. During Roman rule, Lusitanian practices merged with Roman deities, forming a syncretic tradition. By the Middle Ages, European Christianity dominated, demonizing former pagan customs. The Catholic Church labeled witchcraft heresy, associating it with the devil, sparking persecution. By the 14th century, the Inquisition investigated alleged witches. A notable case in 1559 involved Maria Gonçalves in Lisbon, who was tried and executed for witchcraft, heightening fear and suspicion. Despite scant evidence, accusations often arose from personal vendettas or social tensions. Between 1626 and 1744, about 816 individuals were accused of witchcraft in Portugal, mainly in rural areas where folkloric traditions thrived and church influence was weaker. The interaction between local customs and church mandates fostered an environment of fear, exacerbated by social factors. The Inquisition, established by King Joan III in 1536, prosecuted witchcraft in Portugal, enforcing Catholic orthodoxy and eliminating heresy. Many accused were women, particularly healers, midwives, or those involved in traditional medicine. Accusations were often driven by local rivalries or economic jealousy. Torture was used to extract confessions, leading to many false admissions. Penalties ranged from public penance to execution by burning. A notorious incident in 1626 saw women in Coimbra accused of causing a plague, tortured, and burned at the stake. Public sentiment and church doctrine reinforced the belief that witches were allied with the devil, increasing pressure on the Inquisition to act decisively. In the 17th century, fear of witchcraft and persecution surged in Portugal, influenced by Spain's fervent witch hunts. The Portuguese Inquisition adopted similar methods, including public trials and executions. One notorious trial involved Isabel Fernandes, accused of harming neighbors with spells. her 1650 trial drew significant attention, with coerced testimonies from townspeople. Isabel was found guilty and burned at the stake, heightening the fear of witchcraft. Records show accusations often targeted vulnerable individuals like widows, the elderly, and the mentally ill, who were marginalized and easy targets. Fear of witches extended to urban centers like Lisbon, with numerous trials and executions. This widespread hysteria, fueled by religious fervor, social unrest, and superstition, created a climate where accusations could easily lead to fatal outcomes. The Church played a central role in the persecution of witches in Portugal. The Catholic Church viewed witchcraft as a direct threat to its authority and collaborated with secular authorities to eliminate it. Sermons and teachings highlighted the dangers of witchcraft, depicting it as a malevolent force allied with Satan. Religious festivals and public gatherings included dramatic plays and reenactments of the battle between good and evil, reinforcing the idea that witches were agents of the devil. The Church's influence permeated the legal system, where ecclesiastical courts held significant power in prosecuting witchcraft cases. Punishments were severe, not only to deter the accused, but also to serve as a warning to others. The fear of being labeled a witch loomed over many, and even minor infractions or eccentric behavior could arouse suspicion. Archives reveal instances where people accused neighbors of witchcraft out of personal grudges or to curry favor with authorities. These accusations could escalate, leading to prolonged investigations and brutal torture to extract confessions. The Church's role in these processes was crucial. Its doctrines and practices were key in sustaining the witch-hunting fervor in Portugal. By the late 17th and early 18th centuries, witch hunts in Portugal began to wane. Skepticism among intellectuals and some clergy led to increased criticism of witch trials. Enlightenment ideas permeated Portuguese society, emphasizing reason and scientific inquiry over superstition and fear. High-profile cases of wrongful accusations and executions fueled public outcry against the Inquisition. One notable case involved Ana de Castro, accused of witchcraft in 1701. Her exoneration after severe torture highlighted the injustices of witch hunting. This case sparked debate and calls for reform. Shifting attitudes led to legal changes. By the mid-18th century, fewer witchcraft cases went to trial, and the use of torture declined. In 1755, the Marquis of Pombal implemented significant reforms to curtail the Inquisition's power. The Marquis of Pombal's mid-18th century reforms curbed the Inquisition's power and marked the decline of witch hunts in Portugal. Influenced by Enlightenment principles, Pombal promoted rationalism and reduced superstition in legal and social matters. His reforms included secularizing education and fostering a more scientific mindset among the populace. He also limited the Church's judicial intervention, ensuring fairer handling of alleged witchcraft cases. The decline of witch hunts was also due to changing societal attitudes. By the late 18th century, belief in witchcraft had significantly weakened. Prominent literary and academic figures criticized the irrationality of witch hunts, and publications debunking witchcraft myths further eroded public support. Portuguese society transitioned from fear-driven superstition to a culture valuing reason and justice. The end of witch hunts in Portugal marks a significant period, reflecting European trends towards enlightenment and rational thought. Moving away from superstition and fear opened the way for modern legal principles and human rights. By the 19th century, Portugal embraced many Enlightenment aspects, including a secular approach to governance and justice. While the intense witch-hunting period left a dark legacy, it highlighted the importance of critical thinking and skepticism in shaping a just society. Portugal's transformation into a nation valuing reason over superstition was gradual, influenced by various intellectual and social currents. Today, the history of witch hunts in Portugal reminds us of the dangers of letting fear and ignorance dictate actions and policies. It underscores the necessity of vigilance in protecting human rights and ensuring justice systems are founded on fairness and rationality, rather than fear and prejudice. And now, the infamous Salem witch trials. The Salem witch trials began in spring 1692 in Salem Village, now Danvers, Massachusetts. This series of hearings and prosecutions led to the execution of 20 people, mostly women. The catalyst was the strange behavior of Elizabeth Parris and Abigail Williams, daughter and niece of Reverend Samuel Parris. Their fits and screaming led a local doctor to diagnose them as victims of witchcraft. As fear spread, other young girls exhibited similar behaviors, fueling suspicion and accusations. The hysteria extended beyond Salem Village to other towns in Massachusetts, with 200 people accused of witchcraft. Reverend Samuel Parris played a significant role in spreading the panic through his sermons. The trials were influenced by local politics, family feuds, and superstitions about the supernatural. As the Salem witch trials progressed, the Court of Oyer and Terminer, established by Governor William Phips in May 1692, oversaw the trials. The court used spectral evidence, testimony that the spirit of the accused was seen committing witchcraft. This evidence, based on visions and dreams rather than tangible proof, was heavily criticized and controversial. Judges Samuel Sewall, William Stoughton, and John Haythorne presided, with Stoughton particularly zealous in prosecuting alleged witches. The most infamous trial was Bridget Bishop's, the first executed on June 10, 1692. Known for her unconventional lifestyle, Bishop was an easy target. Her conviction set a severe precedent, leading to a wave of trials and executions. The court's reliance on spectral evidence and intense societal pressure ensured many more followed Bishop to the gallows. During the Salem witch trials, accusations were rampant. Respected community members like Rebecca Nurse and Martha Corey faced charges. Nurse, a devout elderly woman, was initially acquitted but retried and executed on July 19, 1692. Corey, known for her strong will, was also convicted and met the same fate. The trials devastated families. Giles Corey, Martha's husband, refused to plead and was subjected to pressing, a torture method involving heavy stones on his chest, leading to his death. Confessions were often extracted through intense psychological pressure, threats, and physical coercion. Fear of accusation led some to falsely confess to witchcraft, hoping to save themselves by implicating others. This created a vicious cycle of accusation and confession, exacerbating the hysteria. The pervasive atmosphere of distrust and fear in Salem made any dissenting voice a target, ensuring the trial's relentless progression. By late summer 1692, the Salem witch trials faced increasing scrutiny. Doubts about spectral evidence and confession methods grew. Prominent figures like Increase Mather, a respected minister, publicly denounced spectral evidence. His influential work argued it was better for 10 suspected witches to escape than for one innocent person to be condemned. Governor William Phips, influenced by Mather's arguments, intervened. In October 1692, Phips dissolved the Court of Oyer and Terminer, halting the witch trials. He replaced it with the Superior Court of Judicature, which did not allow spectral evidence, leading to the acquittal and release of many prisoners. This change marked a significant turning point, signaling the beginning of the end for the Salem witch trials. After the dissolution of the Court of Oyer and Terminer, the mood in Salem shifted. Public sentiment turned against the trials, and apologies emerged. The families of the accused sought to clear their loved ones' names. In 1697, Judge Samuel Sewall publicly confessed his role in the trials and asked for forgiveness. Massachusetts declared a day of fasting and reflection for the tragedy. In 1702, the trials were declared unlawful. Further restitution came in 1706 when Ann Putnam, one of the original accusers, publicly apologized. The state continued addressing the injustices, culminating in 1711 when the Massachusetts legislature passed a bill restoring the rights and reputations of the accused, along with financial reparations. The legacy of the Salem witch trials endures as a cautionary tale, reminding us of the dangers of unchecked mass hysteria and the potential for injustice when due process is ignored. Sites like the Salem Witch Museum and the Witch House commemorate this dark chapter in American history. The trials have inspired numerous studies, books, and films, each analyzing the paranoia and social dynamics involved. Salem has transformed its historical notoriety into a platform for educating about the perils of intolerance and the need for a rational, humane judicial system. Next up, one of the most famous witches of all time, or so they say about her, the Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc was born around 1412 in Domremy, a small village in northeastern France. Her early life was ordinary. She was the daughter of a tenant farmer living in a time of conflict. When she was born, the 100 Years' War between France and England had already raged for 2 generations, devastating parts of France. Joan grew up with tales of French heroes like Charlemagne and the war's events, which would shape her future. At 13, Joan began experiencing visions and hearing voices. She claimed that St. Michael, St. Catherine, and St. Margaret instructed her to support Charles VII and drive the English from France. Initially, her claims met with skepticism, but she persisted. By 16, she convinced a local garrison leader to escort her to the Dauphin Charles. Despite her youth and gender, her passionate pleas secured a meeting with Charles, leading to her military campaign. Joan of Arc's influence surged after her 1429 meeting with Charles VII. Granted a small army, she was tasked with lifting the English siege of Orléans, a strategic city. Defying expectations, Joan led her troops to crucial victories, ending the siege in 9 days. This triumph marked a pivotal moment in the Hundred Years' War, bolstering French morale and affirming Charles VII's legitimacy as the rightful heir to the French throne. After her triumph at Orléans, Joan of Arc continued to secure victories. She played a crucial role in several battles, culminating in Charles VII's coronation in Reims on July 17, 1429. Her battlefield presence became symbolic, rallying French forces and intimidating the English. Despite her successes, Joan faced growing opposition from both the enemy and within the French court. Her conviction and leadership cemented her as a legendary figure in French history. In early 1430, Joan of Arc's fate shifted. On May 23, 1430, defending Compiègne, she was captured by the Burgundians, English allies. They handed her to the English, who imprisoned her in Rouen. The English and their allies viewed Joan as a threat to their control over France and aimed to discredit her. Joan's trial for heresy, witchcraft, and cross-dressing began in January 1431. The proceedings were biased, aiming to discredit her and the French cause. Despite limited legal knowledge, Joan defended herself with remarkable composure, insisting her visions were from God. On May 30, 1431, Joan of Arc was convicted and burned at the stake at 19 years old. After Joan of Arc's death, her legacy flourished. In 1456, Pope Calixtus III authorized a posthumous retrial. The investigation declared her innocent and proclaimed her a martyr. Her exoneration solidified her status as a French heroine and symbol of resistance. Joan's image evolved over centuries, becoming a figure of national pride and unity for France, especially during conflicts. Her story was invoked during the Napoleonic Wars and both World Wars as a symbol of courage and patriotism. In 1920, Joan of Arc was canonized as a saint by the Roman Catholic Church, recognizing her spiritual significance. Joan of Arc endures as a symbol of faith, courage, and patriotism. Her life has inspired numerous books, films, and studies. She remains pivotal in French history and Christian iconography. Streets, statues, and churches dedicated to her exist throughout France and globally. Joan of Arc's journey from a teenage visionary to a national military leader and martyr enriches our understanding of medieval Europe. Labeled a witch by her enemies, her sainthood and heroism have eclipsed these accusations. Joan of Arc exemplifies how conviction and bravery can alter history. Moving forward in time, witchcraft during the Renaissance era is deeply rooted in the socio-political and religious upheavals of the time. The early Renaissance, spanning the 14th to 17th centuries, marked a revival of classical learning and values, creating fertile ground for intellectual and cultural expression. However, it also sparked fears and superstitions within communities. The era was characterized by centralization of power, widespread wars, and religious fracturing, particularly between the Catholic Church and the Protestant Reformation. These disruptions heightened uncertainty and anxiety among the populace, making them more susceptible to beliefs in witchcraft and the supernatural. The infamous Malleus Maleficarum, published in 1487 by Heinrich Kramer and Jacob Sprenger, played a pivotal role in shaping views on witchcraft. This manual sanctioned the identification, persecution, and execution of supposed witches, establishing a framework for widespread witch hunts. Key figures, such as John Calvin and Martin Luther, contributed to the discourse, often promoting the idea that witches were in league with the devil. This period also saw secular courts involved in witch trials, reflecting the deep entanglement of political power with the fear of witchcraft. The Renaissance's fascination with the mythical and occult fueled interest in witchcraft. Scholars like Agrippa von Nettesheim and Paracelsus studied alchemy and esoteric subjects, blurring lines between science and magic. Their studies included astrology, divination, and necromancy, all linked to contemporary views on witchcraft. The printing press played a significant role, spreading texts and ideas about witchcraft. Pamphlets, books, and manuals detailing witch trials and confessions circulated widely, contributing to the hysteria. Rulers used witch hunts to consolidate power. Folklore and popular beliefs significantly influenced witchcraft during the Renaissance. Many witch legends were rooted in pre-Christian and pagan practices, reinterpreted to blend old superstitions with contemporary fears. Unmarried, widowed, or outspoken women were often viewed with suspicion. The Church's teachings on women's inherent sinfulness and moral weakness amplified these fears. The intersection of medicine and witchcraft during the Renaissance is a fascinating historical aspect. Medical knowledge was nascent, with many ailments attributed to supernatural causes. physicians and apothecaries often competed with folk practitioners using herbal remedies and charms. These healers faced witchcraft accusations as their practices diverged from emerging medical science. Midwives were frequent targets due to their role in childbirth, surrounded by superstitions and high mortality rates. The church and state viewed these women's medical practices with suspicion, fearing their herbal knowledge linked to witchcraft. The Renaissance's emphasis on empirical observation and scientific inquiry sometimes clashed with entrenched superstitions. Figures like Galileo and Leonardo da Vinci, who championed new scientific methods, indirectly influenced societal views on unexplained phenomena, including witchcraft. Their work symbolized a shift towards rational explanations, even as superstition remained prevalent. Renaissance legal frameworks profoundly impacted witch persecution. Trials became systematic, with standardized procedures and documentation. Accusations followed a pattern: suspicion, arrest, interrogation, and often torture for confessions. Local magistrates and inquisitors, adhering to secular and ecclesiastical laws, played central roles. Torture devices like thumbscrews and the strapado were common to force admissions of guilt. Detailed records of trials, including confessions, accusations, and verdicts, were meticulously kept, fueling hysteria. Witch hunters documented alleged pacts with the devil, attendance at witches' sabbats, and malevolent magic against neighbors. Cultural works, including plays and pamphlets, depicted witches as evil, entrenching these ideas in popular consciousness. Despite challenges by skeptical thinkers, fear and persecution of witches persisted throughout the Renaissance. During the Enlightenment, the concept of witchcraft transformed significantly. Unlike previous centuries marked by rampant witch hunts and trials, the Enlightenment ushered in rational thought and scientific inquiry. European intellectuals questioned the existence and nature of witches. Figures like Voltaire and Diderot promoted skepticism and criticized superstitions surrounding witchcraft. The Enlightenment's emphasis on reason and evidence led to a decline in witch hunts, as accusations were increasingly seen as irrational and baseless. The Enlightenment saw the publication of influential texts that challenged traditional beliefs about witchcraft. Reginald Scott's The Discovery of Witchcraft, first published in 1584, gained significance during this period. Scott argued that witchcraft was a delusion and criticized the harsh punishments inflicted on alleged witches. Johann Weyer published De Praestigiis Demonum in 1563, also questioning the validity of witch hunts. These texts laid the groundwork for a more rational and humane approach to suspected witchcraft cases during the Enlightenment. Legal reforms during the Enlightenment significantly contributed to the decline of witchcraft persecution. The introduction of systematic legal procedures and the emphasis on empirical evidence reduced witch hunts. In 1682, Louis XIV of France issued an edict ending witch trials in his kingdom. Similarly, in 1714, Prussia's Frederick William I decreed that witchcraft accusations were mere superstitions and not legally prosecutable. These reforms reflected Enlightenment ideals of reason, justice, and human rights, fostering a more critical view of witchcraft allegations. Scientific advancements in the 17th and 18th centuries significantly changed perceptions of witchcraft. The rise of natural sciences and the scientific method promoted rational examination of phenomena once attributed to witchcraft. Medical progress improved understanding of mental illnesses and neurological disorders, often misinterpreted as witchcraft or demonic possession. Researchers like Antony van Leeuwenhoek, a pioneer in microbiology, showed that many diseases had natural causes. This shift in understanding reduced the credibility of witchcraft allegations and contributed to their decline. The decline of witchcraft persecution during the Enlightenment can be attributed to changes in religious thought. Enlightenment thinkers promoted deism, emphasizing reason and morality over superstition and dogma. This new perspective encouraged skepticism towards witchcraft accusations. Additionally, the separation of church and state reduced religious authorities' influence over legal matters, leading to fewer witch trials. The shift towards secular governance and the promotion of human rights fostered a more humane attitude towards individuals accused of witchcraft. The Victorian era, spanning from 1837 to 1901, was a time of significant social, cultural, and technological changes. Amid these transformations, witchcraft experienced a notable revival, fueled by growing interest in the occult and reactions against industrialization. The era saw a blend of scientific inquiry and superstition, as people turned to witchcraft to reclaim a sense of mystery and control in lives increasingly dominated by technology and industry. Witchcraft adapted to contemporary Victorian sensibilities, with books on the subject blending folklore and emerging scientific theories. Notable works include The Witch Cult in Western Europe by Margaret Murray, which posited an organized pagan religion predating Christianity. This period also saw a boom in spiritualism, linked with witchcraft, as people sought communication with spirits and the dead, providing comfort in an era of uncertainty and change. Organizations and societies dedicated to witchcraft and the occult, such as the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, emerged. These groups combined ancient rituals, Hermeticism, and magic theories, making their teachings accessible to the Victorian intellectual elite. The resurgence of witchcraft during the Victorian era stemmed from a fascination with the exotic and unknown. The British Empire's expansion introduced Victorians to diverse religious practices and occult traditions, sparking curiosity and a desire for mystical exploration. Many turned to witchcraft to access ancient wisdom and esoteric knowledge. The rise of literacy and the publishing industry made occult knowledge more accessible. Witchcraft-related publications, such as grimoires, manuals, and pamphlets, circulated widely, catering to a growing interest in the supernatural. Notable examples include the Key of Solomon, detailing magical practices, and Helena Blavatsky's The Secret Doctrine, which combined occultism with philosophy and comparative religion. Victorian witchcraft often intertwined with the era's feminist movement. As women sought greater autonomy, witchcraft offered alternative spiritual practices that empowered them. Female practitioners, like self-styled witch and occultist Dion Fortune, played influential roles in promoting and preserving witchcraft traditions, linking them with contemporary social movements. Psychological theories bolstered the appeal of witchcraft. The burgeoning field of psychology, represented by Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, delved into the unconscious mind and the power of symbols and archetypes. This climate fostered the acceptance of witchcraft within mainstream culture. People sought to understand their inner lives and anxieties through magical rituals and symbol interpretation. Witchcraft intersected with the Victorian interest in nature and pastoral life. The era saw a renewed appreciation for the natural world, contrasting the grim realities of urban industrial life. Witchcraft, emphasizing natural elements and cycles, resonated with those yearning for a deeper connection to the environment. Practices like herbalism, moon rituals, and seasonal celebrations gained prominence. The Victorian era's fascination with death and the afterlife intertwined with witchcraft. Mourning rituals, seances, and a preoccupation with communicating with the dead were prevalent. Witchcraft offered structured ways to engage with these themes, providing comfort and a sense of control over life's unknown aspects. Figures like spiritualist medium Florence Cook captivated public imagination, blending witchcraft and spiritualism. Folklore and local traditions significantly influenced the origin and revival of witchcraft in the Victorian era. Many Victorian households preserved ancestral beliefs and practices, merging them with a newfound fascination for the occult. This blend created a unique form of Victorian witchcraft, rooted in tradition, yet adapted to contemporary interests. The impact of literary works was also profound. Gothic novels like Bram Stoker's Dracula and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, though not directly about witchcraft, fostered an atmosphere of supernatural intrigue. These stories captivated the public's imagination, prompting deeper exploration of related occult practices. Authors such as Arthur Machen and Algernon Blackwood explicitly focused on witchcraft and the supernatural, further fueling interest in occult themes. Rapid technological advancements, exposure to global cultures, psychological theories, nature reverence, and literary contributions all played significant roles. Together, these elements created an environment where witchcraft thrived, offering solace and a connection to the mysterious and mystical in an ever-changing world. And before we hop on to modern times, let's see how different religions have viewed witchcraft. Witchcraft, deeply embedded in global cultural narratives, originates from various religious traditions, including Buddhism. Early Buddhist texts from around the 5th century BC mention rituals and spells. These references appear in the Pali Canon, the ancient scriptures of Theravada Buddhism. Contrary to modern perceptions, these practices aimed at protection and healing, not malevolence. Monks and lay practitioners used spells and charms to ward off evil spirits, cure sickness, and ensure safe travels. The Buddhist concept of Maya, often translated as illusion or magic, further complicates understanding witchcraft in this context. Texts like Siddhartha Gautama's Jataka tales depict Buddha using supernatural powers to teach moral lessons. This depiction of magic is morally neutral, emphasizing intent over inherent good or evil. Such narratives enriched Buddhist thought on supernatural phenomena, influencing later interpretations and practices. Buddhist witchcraft blends indigenous beliefs and practices encountered as Buddhism spread across Asia. In regions like Tibet and China, shamanistic traditions merged with Buddhist teachings. Tibetan Buddhism integrated Bon religion's rituals involving spirits and protective deities, including complex ceremonies and chants believed to influence natural and supernatural forces. A prominent figure in Tibetan Buddhist witchcraft is Padmasambhava, an 8th century Indian tantric master revered for his magical abilities. Legends assert he subdued local demons and established Buddhism in Tibet through powerful rituals and spells. In China, the integration of Taoist elements into Buddhism further exemplifies this blend. Taoist alchemy, astrology, and talismanic practices enriched Buddhist monastic routines, enhancing the approach to spiritual well-being. Southeast Asia offers unique perspectives on Buddhist witchcraft. In Thailand, practitioners called ajarns blend Buddhist and animist rituals, using amulets, tattoos, and sacred objects imbued with magical properties for protection and fortune. Sakyant tattoos, often intricate, are believed to grant supernatural powers to the wearer. Sri Lanka's approach to Buddhist witchcraft shows another distinct adaptation. Healing rituals called hunian are performed by specialists to address illness, possession, and bad luck. These ceremonies involve elaborate incantations and offerings to deities and spirits, illustrating how Buddhist witchcraft adapts to regional cultures while maintaining core principles of compassion and protection. The historical trajectory of witchcraft in Buddhism illustrates its ability to integrate diverse cultural elements. Buddhist rituals and spells were adapted to align with local beliefs and customs. Modern practitioners might use traditional rituals for personal and communal well-being. The enduring presence of these practices highlights the continued relevance of the supernatural in Buddhist traditions. Whether through healing rituals, protective charms, or spiritual tattoos, the intersection of witchcraft and Buddhism remains a rich field of cultural and religious significance. Next religion we're going to look into is Taoism, which is going to surprise you, I bet you that. Taoism, a spiritual and philosophical tradition from ancient China, has a deep history with witchcraft. This connection reflects the reverence for nature and the supernatural. Taoist witchcraft's origins lie in ancient Chinese shamanistic practices, where shamans mediated between human and spirit worlds. Rituals included invoking spirits, divination, and seeking spiritual guidance. Early Taoist texts discuss controlling natural elements, akin to modern witchcraft. Key components of Taoist witchcraft involve talismans, spells, and incantations for healing, protection, and harm, believed to harness natural energies. Prominent Taoist figures, like Ge Hong from the Eastern Jin dynasty, wrote extensively on alchemy and practices for immortality and spiritual transcendence. He detailed summoning spirits, using magical herbs, and performing complex rituals. The Daozang, or Taoist canon, contains numerous texts detailing the practices and rituals involving witchcraft. A prominent feature was the use of fu, Taoist talismans with specific symbols and characters believed to carry magical powers. These fu were used for various purposes, including warding off evil spirits, healing illnesses, and ensuring good fortune. Another significant aspect was the role of Taoist priests, intermediaries between the spiritual and human realms. They performed complex rituals to balance the energies of yin and yang, critical concepts in Taoism representing opposing forces in the universe. These priests also practiced divination to foresee future events and offer guidance. Historical records from the Han Dynasty mention the use of witchcraft in state affairs, reflecting its accepted role in society. The court often sought the counsel of Taoist practitioners to perform rituals aimed at securing political stability and success in military campaigns. By the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907 AD, Taoist witchcraft had become integral to popular culture and state religion. Taoist temples served as hubs for spiritual and magical practices, where priests performed rites to harness supernatural powers. This era saw the development of sophisticated Taoist magic, including alchemical experiments aimed at achieving immortality and creating elixirs for eternal life. A notable aspect was the emphasis on inner alchemy, focusing on cultivating spiritual and physical energy through meditation and specific training to align with natural forces. Texts like the Taiping Jing detail complex magical rites and interactions with deities and spirits. Records also show Taoist practitioners involved in healing plagues and natural disasters, highlighting their role in addressing communal crises. Taoist witchcraft evolved through the Song and Ming dynasties, with practitioners refining techniques and expanding influence. The Song dynasty saw a flourishing of Taoist literature, with manuals on magical practices becoming widely available. These texts provided instructions on crafting talismans, conducting exorcisms, and summoning spirits. The Ming dynasty emphasized integrating Taoist rituals into daily life, making household exorcisms and protective charms common. Taoist witchcraft played a role in village affairs, where local priests mediated between the community and the spirit world. Practices evolved to include more communal and accessible forms of magic, aiming at collective well-being and protection. This era also marked the standardization of many rituals, making them more uniform across regions. And now, Hinduism, one of the oldest religions, has a rich tapestry of supernatural beliefs, including witchcraft. References to witchcraft in Hinduism date back to the Vedic texts around 1500 to 500 BC. The Atharva Veda, one of the four Vedas, contains hymns describing rituals to ward off evil spirits and curses, highlighting the belief in supernatural forces and the need for protection against them. In ancient Hindu society, witches were seen as individuals with the power to harness supernatural forces for both benevolent and malevolent purposes. They were believed to cast spells, heal illnesses, and communicate with the spirit world. The dual nature of witches, as both protectors and threats, added to their mystique and fear. A significant aspect of witchcraft in Hinduism is the concept of agoris. Agoras are ascetics who engage in post-mortem rituals and are often associated with black magic. They worship Shiva in his Bhairava form, a manifestation of Shiva associated with destruction. Their practices include meditating on corpses and using ash from cremation grounds, symbolizing their defiance of orthodox norms and their connection to the supernatural. The Rudra Kalpa, an ancient Hindu text, describes methods to invoke spirits and control supernatural entities, underscoring the societal belief in the power of words and rituals to influence reality. The Yajurveda references Yatudanas, practitioners of black magic believed to be possessed by demonic forces and capable of causing harm, indicating a deep belief in the supernatural in ancient Hindu culture. Medieval India saw the rise of Tantrism, a complex system incorporating elements of witchcraft, emphasizing mantras, yantras, and rituals to attain spiritual power and control over supernatural forces. This marked a significant departure from Vedic traditions, highlighting the diverse nature of Hindu spiritual practices. Deities like Kali and Durga, depicted in fierce forms, were worshipped for protection against evil forces. These goddesses embody both destruction and protection, resonating with the dual nature of witchcraft. Their worship involves intense rituals and offerings, emphasizing the connection between Hinduism and witchcraft. Hindu witchcraft intriguingly incorporates amulets and talismans, believed to protect against evil spirits and negative energies. Common materials include herbs, metals, and sacred threads, each empowered by specific mantras and rituals. Certain Indian regions have a tradition of witch doctors, known as ojas, or tantrics. These practitioners address issues like health problems, protection from black magic, and finding lost objects. Their roles combine spirituality and practical problem-solving, making them vital community figures. Village deities, or Gramadevata, are crucial in local witchcraft practices. Unique to specific villages, these deities are invoked for protection and blessings. Rituals honoring them may include animal sacrifices, fire rituals, and community feasts. Hindu mythology offers numerous tales illustrating witchcraft. One prominent story involves the demoness Putana, who tried to kill the infant Krishna with poisoned milk. Instead, Krishna sucked the life out of her, highlighting the belief in evil forces and supernatural counteractions. The legend of Bhashmasura tells of a demon who received a boon from Lord Shiva, granting him the power to turn anyone he touched into ashes. This myth underscores the peril of misusing supernatural powers, a recurring theme in witchcraft stories. Festivals like Holi and Diwali also have ties to witchcraft and the supernatural. Holi, the festival of colors, is linked to the burning of the demoness Holika, symbolizing the triumph of good over evil. Diwali, the festival of lights, involves rituals to ward off evil spirits and invite prosperity and protection from deities like Lakshmi and Kali. Modern India still retains traces of these ancient beliefs. While a scientific worldview has gained prominence, traditional practices related to witchcraft remain, especially in rural areas. Witchcraft in Hinduism is a complex interplay of ancient texts, societal roles, myths, and modern realities, reflecting both fear and wonder. Next on our list, Christianity and the New Testament. The origins of witchcraft in the New Testament are both fascinating and complex. Understanding the cultural and historical context of these texts is crucial for grasping early Christian views on witchcraft. In the New Testament, witchcraft intertwines with themes of good and evil, salvation, and divine power. The Greek term pharmakia, often translated as witchcraft or sorcery, appears in Galatians 5:20 and Revelation 18:23, originally referring to the use of potions or drugs. Early Christians were wary of pharmakia due to its associations with pagan rituals and its potential to manipulate free will or alter reality. Mediums and spiritists, believed to communicate with the dead or predict the future, were also condemned. In Acts 8:9-24, Simon Magus, a sorcerer in Samaria, exemplifies this condemnation. Simon's attempt to buy the Holy Spirit's power from the apostles underscores the early church's stance against using magical practices for personal gain. The New Testament's portrayal of witchcraft is influenced by Mosaic law in the Old Testament. Early Christians inherited Jewish laws that prohibited witchcraft and sorcery, labeling them abominations. Deuteronomy 18:10-12 denounces practices such as divination, soothsaying, and necromancy. This Jewish framework shaped New Testament writers' perspectives, ensuring continuity in anti-witchcraft sentiment. Additionally, the Greco-Roman context in which Christianity spread played a role. Magic and witchcraft were prevalent in the Greco-Roman world, with various rituals and spells aimed at influencing divine and natural forces. However, early Christians distinguished their faith by rejecting these practices, emphasizing the miracles performed by Jesus and the apostles as acts of divine intervention. Witchcraft was viewed as a remnant of paganism and a challenge to the authenticity and power of Christian miracles. This dichotomy created a boundary between acceptable divine miracles and prohibited magical practices, strengthening the early church's identity. Evidence of the New Testament's stance on witchcraft appears in several key incidents and teachings. The story of Elymas the sorcerer in Acts 13:6-12 is particularly revealing. Elymas, also known as Bar-Jesus, is a Jewish sorcerer who opposes Paul and Barnabas in Cyprus. Paul, filled with the Holy Spirit, rebukes Elymas, striking him blind. This event underscores that sorcery is inherently opposed to God's work. In Revelation 21:8, sorcerers are listed among those who will face the second death, indicating divine judgment against magical practices. The New Testament consistently associates witchcraft with falsehood and opposition to divine truth. Early Christian writers like Ignatius of Antioch and Justin Martyr warned against the dangers of sorcery and magic, reinforcing the New Testament's warnings. Their writings reflect an ongoing struggle to define Christian identity against prevailing cultural practices. Witchcraft and sorcery were thus not only theological issues, but also practical concerns in the daily lives of early Christians, guiding them away from influences that threatened their spiritual well-being. The New Testament's references to witchcraft significantly influenced early Christian views on magic and sorcery. As Christianity spread, these references defined acceptable religious practices. Condemning witchcraft reinforced Christian identity, distinguishing divine miracles from pagan magic. Over time, these biblical views were integrated into Christian theology and ecclesiastical law. Church fathers like Augustine of Hippo expanded the argument against witchcraft, seeing it as demonic influence. This interpretation solidified in medieval doctrine, leading to infamous witch hunts. The fear of witchcraft, linked with heresy and diabolic pacts, resonated throughout Christian history. Despite cultural shifts, the New Testament's initial condemnations left a lasting legacy, providing a framework for addressing alleged witchcraft into the early modern period. And now, as promised, World War II and witchcraft. During World War II, British intelligence agency MI5 used unconventional tactics to deceive the enemy, including witchcraft and the occult. This idea stemmed from a military interest in the supernatural, championed by Aleister Crowley. Known for his occult practices, Crowley was engaged in spreading misinformation and psychological operations to confuse the Nazis. MI5 aimed to exploit the Nazis' belief in the occult to manipulate their decisions and sow discord. The Nazis believed in astrology and occult symbols, thinking they could predict and alter outcomes through mystical means. By feeding false astrological predictions and creating fake occult symbols, British intelligence sought to mislead Nazi leaders and foster uncertainty in their decision-making. Aleister Crowley's involvement remains one of the most enigmatic and lesser-known aspects of the war, blending psychological warfare with mystical intrigue. Beyond Aleister Crowley's contributions, other figures and events intertwined wartime activities with the supernatural. One notable instance is Operation Mistletoe, involving Duncan Cameron, a prominent occultist. The operation focused on creating deceptive magical rites to destabilize Nazi confidence and included the distribution of mystical artifacts believed to have magical properties. Cameron staged elaborate rituals intended to be intercepted by enemy intelligence, suggesting the British harnessed supernatural powers. These operations aimed to influence enemy morale and create fear, reflecting the British military's understanding of the psychological impact of the occult. Another significant event was the supposed hexing of Adolf Hitler. In 1941, a group of witches, organized by Dion Fortune, performed rituals to protect Britain and hinder Hitler's advances. These acts of wartime witchcraft, whether fully believed by practitioners or used as psychological tools, illustrate the lengths to which wartime strategies extended, embracing both traditional intelligence methods and the mystical. During the war, both the Allies and Axis powers sought to exploit supernatural fears, tapping into age-old superstitions as tools in psychological warfare. The British government endorsed these methods for their potential results and low cost compared to conventional warfare. Reputed mediums and astrologers were consulted to develop enemy-directed propaganda. One bizarre example involves phony horoscopes crafted by British intelligence to negatively affect enemy morale. By predicting catastrophic outcomes for key Nazi figures, they fostered dread and uncertainty. Additionally, British propaganda efforts tried to convince the enemy that supernatural forces were aligned against them, compounding their anxieties. Historical records reveal that the occult played a role in rallying British spirits. In desperate times, people turned to any means that might offer hope. This environment led to the rise of figures like Dion Fortune, who influenced through her writings and public rituals aimed at manifesting protective energy over Britain. Fortune's work received attention from both the military and civilians, blurring the lines between conventional support and mystical practices. By employing symbols and rituals steeped in British folklore and mysticism, these acts reinforced national identity and resilience. Symbols like the pentagram, or rituals invoking ancient deities, reclaimed and fortified a sense of heritage and purpose against the Nazi threat. The cultural impact of these wartime practices showcased the multifaceted nature of psychological warfare, encompassing not just fear tactics, but also communal strength and solidarity. The war's end did not abruptly halt the intrigue surrounding occult practices. Post-war, many involved in these activities faded into obscurity, while legends of their contributions grew. The blend of fact and folklore during the war years created a complex tapestry of myth and reality that fascinates historians and enthusiasts. The legacy of wartime witchcraft testifies to human creativity and resilience amid existential threats. These efforts, whether rooted in genuine belief or psychological tactics, underscored the adaptability of wartime strategies. The use of witchcraft and occult practices in World War II reminds us how unconventional methods can be employed during great uncertainty. It also highlights the lengths nations will go to preserve morale and cultural identity. While the practical impact of these mystical methods may never be fully quantifiable, their story remains a captivating chapter in the broader war narrative, illustrating extraordinary measures taken in pursuit of victory. Witchcraft has fascinated and frightened cultures for centuries. Historically, it has been linked to both harmful practices and healing traditions. Its modern resurgence, particularly in Western societies, gained momentum in the 20th century, often tied to the countercultural movements of the 1960s and 1970s, which embraced alternative spiritualities. The establishment of Wicca in the 1950s by Gerald Gardner was pivotal in shaping contemporary witchcraft. Wicca, a modern pagan religion, emphasizes nature worship and ritual magic. Gardner's work highlighted witchcraft as a legitimate spiritual path, not malevolent sorcery. This shift in perception boosted witchcraft's popularity as a form of personal empowerment and spiritual expression. By the late 20th century, witchcraft had evolved into a diverse, eclectic movement, incorporating various traditions and practices. Today, the internet and social media have further fueled modern witchcraft's growth, providing platforms for practitioners to connect, share knowledge, and build communities. Online resources like blogs, forums, and social media groups have made information about witchcraft more accessible, allowing people from different backgrounds to explore and engage with these practices in new ways. Since the 1990s, the visibility and acceptance of witchcraft have surged. Media portrayals in books, TV shows, and movies have depicted witches from villainous to heroic. The 1996 film The Craft and the series Buffy the Vampire Slayer showcased witchcraft as empowering for young women. Literature like Starhawk's The Spiral Dance has become foundational for modern witches. This period also embraced feminist and LGBTQ+ perspectives within witchcraft, broadening its inclusivity and appeal. The late 20th and early 21st centuries saw the rise of public witchcraft events, such as pagan pride days, where people openly celebrated and learned about their practices. Online technology remains crucial in spreading and evolving witchcraft. Platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube feature influencers sharing tips, tutorials, and personal experiences. This digital era has fostered global witchcraft communities, enabling rapid and diverse information exchange. Modern witchcraft is continually evolving. Social justice movements have increased activism within the witchcraft community. Many modern witches engage in environmental activism, advocating for sustainable living and natural resource protection. The intersection of witchcraft with mental health has become prominent, with practices like mindfulness, meditation, and herbalism used for emotional and psychological healing. Technology has given rise to techno-paganism, blending traditional practices with digital tools like astrology, moon phase, and spellcasting apps. Modern witchcraft is also gaining scholarly interest, with academic studies exploring its cultural, social, and psychological impacts. The community continues to grow and diversify, welcoming practitioners from various backgrounds and belief systems. Despite varying practices and beliefs, modern witchcraft emphasizes personal empowerment, community building, and reverence for nature and its cycles. The future of witchcraft is dynamic and expanding. As society becomes more interconnected, global influences will shape modern witchcraft practices. Integrating diverse cultural traditions could create new rituals and beliefs, enriching the practice. The increasing availability of digital resources and online communities suggests that knowledge sharing and communal support will thrive. Additionally, as the world faces environmental challenges, the eco-centric aspects of witchcraft might gain relevance, positioning it as a significant voice in sustainability and ecological preservation. Mental health awareness is also expected to intertwine with witchcraft, blending modern psychological understandings with traditional spiritual healing. Growing academic interest could lead to deeper insights and broader acceptance of witchcraft in mainstream culture. If you enjoyed the last hour and a half of your life, be sure to check out our other documentaries as well, which should have appeared on the screen by now. Don't forget to press the like and subscribe buttons as well. See you again soon, your one and only history provider, History But Fast.